Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Suzi.
Good morning, Sylvia.
Thank you so much for accepting this invitation to share with the world. Hello, everyone. We are in our last weekend of Family Constellation Fundamentals of 2018. The year is coming to an end and our training is coming to an end. And we're here today. I'm super excited to talk about Family Constellation Fundamentals and SuziTucker, which I'm so happy and proud to be working with and learning about Family Constellation Fundamentals. So would you like to share a little bit about this field, especially for people that do not know what family constellations are?
Sure. First of all, yes, it's the last weekend and I'm sort of feeling that. So it's an interesting place because it's both the culmination of this particular course, but it's on a long continuity for me, and I believe sort of for all of us. So it's an interesting, just emotional moment where I'm leaving these students, and that's we become so close in a just a natural, organic way. So just to say that I'm feeling that. Family constellations, for people who don't know anything about them, and I have found that a lot of people have heard the phrase, or I'll say just a little bit, and they actually do know about the work. And I think that's because the work is really a very, again, I use this word, a very naturalistic, relational work that has the sort of sense of escorting people, and I use that word really particularly rather than dropping a healing template onto people or sort of insisting that folks fit into a formula. It's a way of escorting people or accompanying people to integrate what has not been integrated. I think that's a big word in this work. It's a big word in psychology in general. Integration in this work has a special meaning because it is really sort of about a radical inclusion, meaning that the more that we can allow to come in about our histories, about decisions we've made, the better we are positioned to move into a future that's surprising. And truthfully, we want to move into a future that's surprising. It's tempting to stay on a narrow path and try to ensure that we are safe. But when we try to ensure that we are safe, we are saying we don't have the capacity to, face is a strong word, to embrace change. And if we don't have the capacity to embrace change, that's a big filter, because our sense is we're talking about bad things, but truthfully we don't get to discern so finely. So we're also talking about good things. So I think the work is really about relationships. You were saying earlier that there is a way that time has collapsed. And, you know, we are sometimes moving in the deep past, sometimes not even our own, sometimes the past of generations before us. And it sounds mysterious and esoteric, but it's actually really practical because the presupposition is that we haven't arrived fully born, and that what happened in the past, especially the big things, the system shifting things, the wars and the early deaths and the fires that took away
destruction,
all that kind of stuff, immigration, exclusions, all kinds of ways where the root system got severed.
The root system.
The root
Yes.
system, our root system, in all those myriad ways that happens, from the outside usually, forces come in some way. Vocabularies develop in those spaces, meaning that the families break apart for their own survival, and in some ways don't come back together the way they were.
It's not the same anymore
It's
after
not the same.
change or the shift, a force or desired, any which way.
Any which way. And then we tend to grow up with these ideas that, a parent was withholding, or a parent was domineering, or a parent was addicted, or, there's a history in the men's line of absenteeism, or a history in the women's line of absenteeism, whatever it may be. And we don't have access to the event that initiated that vocabulary. And our first experience is that it's us, that we initiated that vocabulary, that we are the cause of mom and dad splitting, that we are the cause of everybody being angry with us. So family constellations is both a, sort of a process and a perspective that looks to connect the event to the current dynamics is such an overused word, to the current forces that feel beyond our control, so that actually we can change the history for the future.
Yes. It is so interesting how I find yours. I don't want to go to the magical realm again, but last night I was contemplating after our work the definition of insanity. I can't keep doing the same thing expecting different results. I needed to be willing to look into with honesty, absolute honesty, about what is happening. And only that moment when we're willing to look in this constellation work with a professional who can hold the container, who knows what she's doing. You usually say, I don't know, I don't know, I'm just here, I don't know.
Yeah.
But definitely there is an experience that is coming through, looking into again and again and again into family stories, the as you said, the vocabulary, the story we say to ourselves, we repeat, and then what is reality in a sense, or what is the status quo, the dynamics that are coming up when we open that, when we set up that field or that constellation. So you really, tap into exactly what I am going through in this moment of, and as a collective, as a group, into looking into.
Right, I love that, and I think when I say that I don't know anything, I really don't mean it in a coy way. I know a lot, but I don't know what the other person should do. That I don't know, but I know the landscape. Sometimes I feel like I'm a person kind of walking through the desert or the jungle or the city, and I know the landscape. I don't know what's around the corner, right? I don't know what's behind that cactus, but I can walk through the landscape, and I think that the thing that I bring is I'm not afraid of your fear. So if I'm not afraid of your fear, and I hold this sense of, I always say I'm very cynical in many ways, and the cursing constellator and all that kind of stuff, but I actually am incredibly optimistic. And I'm not optimistic because, not in a sugary way, I guess, but I'm optimistic in the sense as long as we have landscape,
Right.
we have opportunity.
We have a platform.
We have a
Yes,
platform.
amen.
So the experiential piece in which we are setting up the relationships. And we're setting up the relationships ostensibly to our families, but we're also in doing that, we're setting up the relationships to ourselves, right?
Yes.
The presupposition is, the knowledge is, that intergenerationally and close to home, we carry those forces in the family. And part of the reason we become so angry is because we carry them and
Yes.
we know it. And we don't know how to integrate, again, using the word integrate them, so that they can work for us and not against us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easier to become angry at
Mm-hmm.
mother, father,
Project all the time.
project. So the process of family constellations is setting up these relationships, and not only moving back and forth in time, but moving back and forth between these being representatives of people and entities that are important to us, and parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every time somebody sets up, they are setting up threads of who they in fact are.
Mm-hmm.
So that every time there's a reconciliation out here, that reconciliation
It
is in
happens
here.
inside.
So the idea that we are expanding our sense of capacity.
Expanding our sense of capacity, and also I'm keeping notes, the radical inclusion, that, you know, really it came through the work we did together, you know, collecting the rejected pieces or the unseen or whatever we are afraid to see. You are helping us, the facilitator, ideally, but you are helping, because we're talking about your work, to see and stand with the fear, whatever the terror is, inclusion, annihilation, you know, rejection, whatever it is, we're standing there and looking at what is happening.
Right, and that's you. So the two things that come to mind, one is that what we hate, you know, there's that saying, what we reject, we become, right? As a facilitator, I know that those places that people hate are places of incredible energy.
Yes.
And so right next to that thing that they hate, or right inside it, is also the answer to something. Because what I hate is my North Star, right? If I'm running away from something, I am also running toward it.
Yes.
Right?
And also the reaction. If everything I'm doing, a very concrete example, everything I'm doing is a reaction to what my mother said. Either I know it or not know it, still I'm reacting, and I'm not free. I'm not free from that energy, from her will or power or whatever, unless I'm willing to look at it and say,
from her fear.
From her fear, you know, her demands. So that is like a really...
It's very concrete, and it's very, it's the one that people really know best, I would say. With mom particularly, with dad as well. Mother, not because, you know, it's always the mother's fault. It's not that. It's that mom has so much power. Mother, through birth, has the power to change the world. That's a great deal of power. So the idea that sometimes people say to me, you know, I cannot connect with these people. But my response is, not necessarily my verbal response, but the response in my heart is, in saying that, you are inextricably connected. And in fact, as I tell you to connect, what I'm telling you is that's the way to separate. In a positive way.
In a positive way. That power, the power of rejection or force or control, somehow it is losing that absolute domination on us when we're like, oh, I see you, you're here, you're part of me. You know, that recognition. Which leads me to the next question. I want I wanted, if it's possible, to talk a little bit about, the classic, I would say, the orders of love or belonging, the fundamental principles in that way, and what you found, let's say, comes first. What is usually when you see it's coming up first? Maybe, you're going with a schedule, we're going to talk about this, but in your experience, what did you see coming up first in the psyche of the group or the collective?
Belonging. And, I would say that I was also affected by hearing Hellinger talk, Bert Hellinger, who assembled this work, at one point, talk about belonging being the thing that he really felt that he brought to the table, to the big philosophical, therapeutic table.
It's a feast.
Yes, it's a feast.
Yes.
And not that people haven't spoken of belonging before, but in looking at what causes violence, particularly, he really saw over and over and over again that the need to belong, first of all, it's at birth, right? It's a survival need. And then as we go on, it still has that primal sense. Belonging is where we are safe. Belonging is where we feel peace. And sometimes belonging leads us down very dark alleys. And we're not encouraged, actually, to update our sense of what belonging is. So sometimes we rail against, for instance, the mother, the family of origin, the entire country of wherever.
The entire political party.
The entire political, the religion,
yeah.
Whatever it is, the poverty of certain places, the wealth of certain... even as we rail against it, we are actually finding unconscious ways to belong to it. So we end up in sort of a prison of our own making. So belonging, I would say, is the first. Belonging is if you look at belonging as kind of the core idea, things about order, which have to do with, a lovely way to put it is sort of how love flows most easily, how freedom flows most easily, how life force flows most easily. That's all that order is about. How does it do it most easily? You're sitting here, I'm sitting here, we know that love, life force came through. Might not have come through easily. Might have come through a pinhole. But that's okay. However, as we go forward and as we look at the future, our own and the future in general, perhaps there are ways that we can stand, adjust our position, so all of that comes more easily through us. So order nested right under belonging.
Order order in a family or in a system is nested right under the need for belonging. And I want to share, it was a profound moment for me when I saw for the first time, when I was willing, rather forced to look into my need for belonging.
Gently invited, you mean?
Gently invited. No, I was not forced in a family constellation group, but situations in my life. All this suffering is the need to belong somewhere, to be part of something, a community, a race, to find in that how is arising now, how deep is the relationship of belonging and identity.
Right.
How deep, and maybe sometimes completely unconscious again, like who am I?
It's interesting, I just taught a course on writing in constellations. Again, kind of bringing more of myself to the table. This is my particular natural
Touch.
synthesis,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not that I planned ever, like, oh, it would be cool to combine this and this. It is kind of that sense of, there are certain junctures where it feels more difficult to hold back than to allow to come forward. And those are wonderful junctures, right? So anyway, so I'm teaching this writing course, and and I asked the simple question of why people were doing it. And there were a couple of vague answers, but most of the people actually in the course were doing it around identity. Either sort of allowing more of their identity to be visible, or even shifting their identity. And one of the things I thought in the shifting their identities is, what does that mean? It means, in a way, expanding their belonging, right? This idea that when I write, it sounds so funny in a way, but when I write, there is a very beautiful feeling that I am standing beside Virginia Woolf. Or that,
what a beautiful image.
and I feel it. I really feel that. So I think belonging can, it starts as an instinct that often leads us down difficult paths, but it can expand into a really creative process if we bring it to the surface as an overt guide. So another part of this work, I really think, is bringing things up to the surface so that those things that are difficult when they're unconscious become beautiful guides when they're conscious.
Beautiful guides and teachers.
And teachers,
I find
for sure.
It's so funny you say this, because I want to share like a short story.
Please.
Last week literally was like my first constellation
That you facilitate.
Coming back to New York City. I usually do one-on-one, but we had a group, and the woman was a writer. And I'm not going to share intimate details, but she was a writer and studied literature, comparative literature. And it was a woman from my particular country and island, almost like my city, like so close to me. And she just walked into the room. I've never seen this person before. And she said, I'm a writer. And the ones I want to bring in my constellation, she brought two famous writers of our region.
How funny.
It was so profound to have that energy in the space. She brought them as guides and supporters into her path. So I find it magical how you bring that up. And I'm just going to say, that's a kind of radical inclusion too. I hadn't really ever thought of that before. But radical
I love
inclusion, and then through them, the family system, of course, again arose, the father, the mother. But would you say, and it's a question, would you say that if people leave, not to be fairy tale or anything, but truly we leave a constellation feeling more supported and more, there is a scaffolding.
My favorite word.
Yes,
it's funny. I wonder who in my family was a carpenter or a builder, because I use all those words, and then I think, gee, I wonder if that's correct.
Part of the or part of the family.
Yes. No. So I think what can happen, and it does. I have to say, it's not, the reason I sort of say it's not magical in the sense of me bestowing something upon somebody else. I think people who really take from this work are the people who I put out my hand and they put out their hand and we say, we're going to collaborate on something. There is an agreement to a level of generosity. That's it, a level of generosity.
I love that. It is the showing up, agreeing, respectful, and also Hellinger. I was reading what you gave us yesterday. Not easy to read.
Not easy to read.
Yeah, not easy to read, but um, um, the agreement of the showing up, eye to eye. Let's do this work and see what will come up. It's so beautiful, so demystifying of other words. I don't want to, talk about other professions, but just like what is here.
What is here, and it's like, I always say when I work with somebody, I look at them and I'm looking. I mean, I'm a good looker, so I'm noticing what people are doing. I'm just noticing how they hold their bodies, what they respond to, all of that kind of stuff. I don't even know I'm doing it. But by the time somebody is sitting beside me or I'm sitting beside them, I'm really sitting beside them.
Yes, you're here.
I'm here,
100%.
I'm present.
Yes.
And because I'm not in this, I'm not in a dyad. I mean, a lot of this work is moving out of the dyads where I only know this or this.
Yes, yes.
And I either have to wipe you out or wipe me out.
Yes,
right.
Which again is telling something about the field, but
That's
we
right.
can go
That's
to
right.
the second meeting
That's
about
right.
that. I want to thank you one more time, and I, as the last question, is there anything else you would like to share with the people that will watch this?
Well, I would say that because there are so many threads, it's actually the work, people who facilitate and even people who come to workshops say it's difficult to talk about. It's not difficult to talk about. It's difficult to shut up about. And the reason that is
the honesty about that.
And the reason that, I know as I go on and on, the reason is because it is a broad philosophical view that looks at all of life, not little compartments of it. So one of the things that I really enjoy about it is that I feel that people sometimes come with a really specific question and they leave changing their life. And that is really sort of this, that goes to a shift in the sense of capacity. That is a little different. I am never going to answer the question. Because that's what I don't know. I don't know whether people should stay or go or quit or get a new job or wear purple.
Leave their husbands,
their
wives,
I have no
kids.
idea. I have no idea. I have no
Don't
idea.
leave your kids.
Don't leave your kids.
Don't do that.
But I do know something about the ground under people's feet when they make these choices.
Yes, and what I can testify really honestly is that I came in with, I'm completely honestly with the symptoms, and came in with anxiety about having to make a decision, hitting a threshold, and of course you brought that exactly in this weekend. And what I am, and we're not done yet, but what I am taking with me is an unfoldment. It's the process of unfoldment of so many stories, people's experiences, and me being part of it, a vital part of one another's lives and constellations, and playing a role, human, looking into it with humanity and with love and compassion, and taking that unfoldment with me and saying, like one of our friends asked me this morning, so what's the plan? And I say, the plan is to chill out for a couple of days.
You get to do that, right?
Exactly, just to integrate, and yes, we will definitely have a second or another meeting together. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my favorite. I enjoy these conversations. I want to add that little noises you're hearing, and I just said thank you to somebody. Students are popping their heads in, and it's very nice. It's very nice.
It's very nice. We're in a beautiful space. Behind us, there's Mother Mary, the mother. So we're working